All right, Nico. Who do we have today?
All right, Taylor. I don't even know how to say your last name. Loht?
Loat sounds like boat.
Loht. All right, we got Taylor Loht. Taylor is an
No.
experienced multifamily and self-storage real estate investor who decided to break into the real estate game in 2015 following Wall Street's major correction that
Major
year.
correction that year.
In the time since he in the time since he made the shift, Taylor has acquired, invested in, partnered on, or otherwise had a hand in over $150 million in multifamily and self-storage real estate investment deals. Taylor has experience on both sides of the podcast interview, both as a guest and as a host. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, how you guys can set up your own podcast, or he's going to run through a lot of different variables of whether or not you want to do it and what the benefits are. He knows what it takes to make a podcast interview engaging, informative, and worthy of your listeners' time. So we're going to check out his podcast after this, and it's called The Passive Wealth Strategy Show. But before that, we're going to get him on to begin chatting a little bit. So, Taylor, welcome to the meetup.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, let's rock, man. So, I don't know if you have a presentation or you're going to just do Q&A or you're going to just start talking, but regardless, you can take the mic. Take it away.
Absolutely. So I have a number of things that I want to run through, ranging from the mechanics of hosting a podcast, things that you need to have, equipment, software, all that kind of stuff. And then I also want to talk about common podcasting objections that I'm aware of because I did all of them. So all of the objections of reasons why I'm not going to start my podcast or I'm not ready yet, I did them. And I know, some of you guys out there are probably falling prey to these as well. So I'll just, can I share my screen? I'm just going to share like portions of my screen here.
Yep, go ahead.
Wait, nothing too embarrassing. No, it's not going to happen. So this is my podcast, The Passive Wealth Strategy Show. As you can see, we've released 585 episodes here over the past, oh boy, four and a half, maybe 5 years. I honestly can't even remember when I got started. And this was not my first podcast. I had a different podcast before this one, the Seven Figure Sales Podcast, where I interviewed real estate investors and sales trainers on sales skills to close big deals because I was a real estate investor at the time and I wanted to do something a little bit different. But honestly, I got tired of talking about that. I wanted to talk about investing rather than talking about sales skills. So you know what? I pivoted. I learned a lesson and I changed what I was doing, got rid of that podcast and started another one. And I think that really gets to a lot of my thoughts around what it takes to be a podcaster is putting it out there, experimenting, iterating, learning along the way. So as far as mechanics of hosting a podcast, there are a lot of things that you need to get in place. Number one, if you want to host a podcast, you got to have a mic. If you're trying to do it with AirPods, you're not going to get as good of audio quality. Certainly the mic that's built into your laptop or your cell phone, those don't work. Get a mic. This is the one that I have, or at least the current model of the one that I have. They're $60. Get a boom. A boom is another $15 or something like that. There's really no good reason to not have a proper mic. And this is kind of a cheap mic. You can go, expensive. I think the ones that like Joe Rogan uses are like $400 microphones. You can do that if you want to, but just going something bare bones will get a lot of that out of the way. You'll get much higher audio quality and your listeners can tell. And your goal hosting a podcast is to get people to listen. Now, we'll talk about ideas about what people want to listen to, but in my opinion, as somebody who not only has a podcast, but listens to podcasts, if the audio quality stinks, I'm tuning right out. I can't stick around. Even if it's something that I really want to learn, I kind of can't stick it out. So get a mic and get a pair of basic headphones. The advantage of having just a earbuds or something is that you get significantly less feedback. And there are functions in all the software that we're going to talk about that will subtract out the feedback from your microphone. but they're not perfect. You're always going to get at least a little bit of feedback through a mic, unless you have earbuds. And these are, whatever, $10 earbuds that I got on Amazon. I mean, heck, it's hard to find cheap wired earbuds today because, everybody's got AirPods. I mean, I've got my AirPods on the table here, but really you need something wired that connects into the back of your microphone so that you get a little bit of feedback and you can hear yourself a little bit through your microphone to make sure you're being picked up. So get a mic, get a pair of headphones or earbuds. And I'm a little conflicted whether I'm going to share some maybe more embarrassing information here, but when I got started, I was thinking about putting this off until later. But since everybody or most people here are well familiar with Jake and Gino, and I've been picking that up here, I keep an archive of every episode that I've recorded. I have a, 3 terabyte hard drive that once an episode's released, I just download all the raw files and put them on the hard drive. Maybe I'll use that later. Well, back in 2019, I was still a relatively new podcaster. I wasn't using the video for my podcast at the time. I was just recording the audio. And I got so lucky to have Jake and Gino on my show. And it wasn't just a random day. They were actually preparing for their event at the time, their large event that was happening in October of 2019. I can't recall what it is, but you could pick it up. And they took about an hour. I have a recording time of 47 minutes here that they spent talking to me. And this is what it looked like. This was my setup at the time. I had a horrendous beard. Fortunately, I'm married now, and I've asked my wife to never let me grow a beard again. But these guys took time to talk with me, and I had these awful headphones, but they did the job. And Jake and Gino, they really went for it, and they gave a great interview. They're awesome subjects because you can just wind them up and let them go. But, it takes starting somewhere. At the time, I wasn't thinking about my appearance on the podcast. Maybe I thought it looked good. I don't know. I can't really grow a good beard, but now you can see I've got more of a setup behind me, some lights and everything. And that was not difficult to do, but that boils down to being willing to start and give it a shot. So I thought I'd share that little bit of now embarrassing image of myself. I mentioned the backdrop. There are kind of 2 ways that you can go in that regard. So you can do like a real physical something behind you. You could have a white wall behind you. If you're not going to use the video, certainly no need to put something behind you. Or you can do a green screen / virtual background. I did a virtual background with a green screen for probably about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years or so. We were using the video, but I made a switch that eliminated the green screen as an option, which I will discuss here in a little bit. My recommendation in that regard is if you're going to do a virtual background or a green screen, get an actual green screen. It's a green cloth that you can buy on Amazon again for $20 and just hang it up behind you, stretch it tight, and experiment with the lighting a little bit so that you can get some good separation between yourself and the background. And then if you can, find an image that doesn't look like a green screen image. They all will to some extent, but if you can find something that looks a bit more natural, I think that's just less jarring if you're going to use the video on YouTube. So get a green screen or do a backdrop. I mean, for me, these are all books that I had. These are shelves from IKEA. These are rope lights that I had and wasn't using. The lights on the floor from Costco, they're smart lights that I can change the color on. And, I think it looks pretty good. Now, when I record a podcast, I stand. I'm sitting for our conversation here. So the framing is a little bit different. I turn off my second monitor, so I get a lot less of this glare off of my glasses here. But thinking about the appearance of the video, I think going with something real is preferable. Now, another big potential expense that you could make in terms of hardware is a webcam or a camera or anything else that any of your other options out there. And for the longest time, I used a 720p Logitech webcam I still have. It's somewhere over that way. I don't use it anymore. And that's what I was using in that video that I shared with Jake and Gino. And the video quality is not good. Granted, now it's a very old webcam, but even the nicest webcams today, the more expensive ones, aren't really very good for recorded audio, or excuse me, recorded video quality. So probably sometime last year, late last year, I can't quite recall the timeline. I was looking for another option and looking at these webcams on Amazon and everything, talking with people, other podcasters about which webcam do you use? What do you think about it? Oh, that's a, whatever, $200 webcam, not too expensive, but it's $200. I could go a little bit higher and get a DSLR. Well, what I landed on and what I'm using right now to talk with you and what I use to record my podcast, at least the video portion of my podcast, is an old cell phone. I'm an Android user and I have a bunch of old beaten up cell phones, but you can get programs. I use Droid Cam X. It's $5 in the Android app store. Hook it up to your computer with a USB-C cable, and it's pretty quick to connect and just runs off of your cell phone. And I think it looks quite good, particularly noting that it costs $5 compared to a webcam that will almost certainly be obsolete within a couple of months, if not the second that you get it. Another big issue I found with the webcams was the lighting balance and the color balance were almost always kind of bad. I mean, I would watch these reviews. They were just kind of pathetic what you could get in a webcam. So that's where I've landed today. I'm using an old cell phone. I think it looks pretty good. You can go higher into like a nicer DSLR. I'm exploring those options today. Sorry, I heard somebody say something. Feel free to, jump in and ask a question or whatever. I'm pretty open about that kind of thing. But I'm looking at DSLRs. I think to get one that would be an upgrade in terms of video quality would be probably for me $1,000, $2,000, and I wouldn't use it for anything other than podcasting. I'm not a photography guy, so not quite ready to make that investment, and I'm not strictly sure it's necessary. Now, I'm talking a lot about not having used the video and only using the audio, and then switching over to use the video. And for the longest time, I was very uncomfortable. I can turn off my share here. I was very uncomfortable like sharing that video out there because I don't really like being out there that much, to be honest with you, even though I've kind of made this my business being out there. But I thought, okay, I need to expand the usage of my content. I think it was Grant Cardone says you should get 5 or 6 pieces of content out of everything that you do. And I'm recording all this video with all these great people like Jake and Gino and so many others that I need to use it. So we started putting out first the audio podcast everywhere, including on YouTube. And then I moved to putting out the video on YouTube. And if you look at my YouTube channel, I have a very small audience as far as YouTube standards go. I mean, I have far more listeners on the audio version of my podcast than on YouTube, but I've still raised hundreds of thousands of dollars through people who have watched me on YouTube and, gotten to know me and come through my lead funnels through my relatively small YouTube channel. So putting that content out there on YouTube and really anywhere else that you can, very valuable. I mean, personally, thinking about my own content consumption habits, I'm a YouTube guy. I mean, we don't have cable. I listen to podcasts through YouTube, and I thought, hey, I need to address that audience. And there are certainly high earners with capital to invest who listen to real estate podcasts on YouTube. So put that out there. A few other things I want to talk about are software. So we're on Zoom here for the longest time. Excuse me a second. For probably 300 or 350 episodes or so, I use Zoom to record the podcast. You can do local or cloud recording of the video and audio. I always do or did local recording because you get better quality than from the cloud, but you really can't get very good quality from Zoom no matter what. You're always subject to the internet speed of your guest and yourself. It's very limited as to what you can get back out of Zoom. And there was one event that, honestly really kind of upset me, because I had this great interview with a married couple. The husband was a firefighter, the wife was a teacher, and they had done a bunch of Burr deals and built up and achieved financial independence, and very inspiring story. But their internet connection was kind of slow. And, we put the episode out there, edited it, but the quality was awful. And I got my first 1-star review on my Apple podcast page from that one interview. The person that it reviewed said, this audio quality stinks. I'm not going to listen to the show anymore. And I thought, man, I can really do better. I've invested all this time and money in this show. I need to find another option. So I switched to, there are quite a few options here for programs like this, but I switched to using Riverside. And I would recommend using Riverside and not using Zoom to record podcasts. Zoom is great for things like this, where you're having a meeting or, a live webinar. I still have a Zoom subscription and I use it for my own webinars. But if you're recording a podcast, you really need purpose-built software that will give you higher quality video and audio. So what Riverside does is you and your guest log into a Riverside room, and Riverside records the tracks separately on each of your computers and uploads those recordings to the server as you have your conversation. It's separate from the streaming conversation that you're having. So if your internet quality drops, it's not affecting the quality of the recording that you get back out. So you get higher quality audio and video for both you and your guest. And that just makes a huge difference. They're adding in, more editing functions into Riverside, into the back end. But I would strongly recommend getting a subscription to Riverside. It's not expensive, as you can see here. I think I have the $24 a month one, heck, maybe even 15, I'm not sure, but it does the job. And you get much higher quality, and they've added this transcription capability, which then you can use for AI for show notes and things like that. Riverside is not the only option as far as that goes. I'm actually looking right now at potentially switching to Squadcast. Does the same function, but they were recently acquired by Descript, and we're going to talk about Descript in a bit. Still not very expensive, about the same pricing structure, and you get the higher quality video and audio recording. So would recommend using Riverside or Descript. I think it was Henry Washington from Bigger Pockets on my show, who at least at the time told me that they were using Riverside to record his show for Bigger Pockets at the time. And larger shows do use programs like this rather than Zoom, because you get much higher quality and the editing functions on the back end. Next key piece of software that you need if you're going to host a podcast, Calendly. Now, I'm not going to go through all the back end of my system, but if you're reaching out, inviting guests on your podcast, send them a Calendly link and have them book it. If somebody reaches out to me and asks me to be on their show, I don't have enough time or energy to go through the back and forth of when are you free? When am I free? All this other, thing. And Calendly's, again, not that expensive, 10, $15 a month, something like that. I'm not sure which one I'm using, but $12 a month. So get a Calendly. Another big advantage of Calendly, beyond its ability to find a mutually agreeable time between you and your guests, is that it integrates with a lot of other software that we can talk about here in a second as well. Now, one of the reasons that I'm considering, speaking of integrations, switching from Riverside to Squadcast is because Squadcast is integrated with Calendly and Riverside is not. So that will eliminate some manual work there. But the key integration for me, not only for podcast guests, but also for my investors and my prospective investors pertaining to Calendly, is between Calendly and Active Campaign. So at the end of the day, we're hosting a podcast, we're running a business to probably grow our investor list. At least that's why I do it. That's probably why a lot of you guys are doing it, looking at becoming thought leaders. You want to grow an investor list, and integrating your tools together, specifically Calendly, will help you build automations so that you can set up like drip campaigns for your investors. Heck, I even have a drip campaign. It's very short for my podcast guests that reminds them, hey, send me a copy of your bio, please. It's just an email asking for it. And then on the back end, my assistant has a copy of their bio and we don't have to go back and ask for it. There are a few other tagging functions in there, but having a calendar scheduling program that will integrate with your CRM, I recommend Active Campaign because of its ability to, and the power of automations that Active Campaign has built in. There is a very steep learning curve to Active Campaign, if you will. I've been using it for, I think, about 3.5 years now, and I'm still finding new ways to improve our automations or more effectively use tagging. But you don't reach that point where you're finding new ways to improve until you get started and give it a shot. So get Active Campaign. You could also get HubSpot. HubSpot is a lot more expensive than Active Campaign. A lot of people use HubSpot, has strong integrations. Check them both out. I think they both have free trials or, cheap options. HubSpot does have a free version, but you do not get the automations and everything. But Active Campaign, you do have to build them. Another key aspect of hosting a podcast is having a website. So for a website, you need a host. I use Bluehost because I started with Bluehost years ago. They kind of stink. They're not very good. I'm looking for another one, but it's kind of low on the list. And then you need a platform to build your website. So mine is a WordPress website that is built with Elementor. There are other website builders out there. Beaver Builder is a bit more popular, and I understand it to be a bit faster than Elementor. I picked Elementor years ago because it was affordable and easy to use. If you're just getting started now, you might want to look for a different option. At this point, I'm a little too deep to have my website completely rebuilt, and we're just dealing with it and using a faster server. But build a website that will host your show notes. It'll be a landing page, help you get some momentum with Google and all the other search providers out there that will start bringing people to your show. And I'm running through things that I had written down that lessons that I've learned along the way, but everybody feel free to jump in if you have questions about this stuff.
Let me have
Sorry.
Steve. Steve, why don't you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, I was just asking. I know you were comparing Riverside and forgot the other one that you mentioned, but there was also Riverside. Do you have any experience with Riverside?
So I am using Riverside now.
I'm sorry, not Riverside, StreamYard. I'm sorry, StreamYard.
StreamYard.
Yeah.
I believe I'm certain I looked at StreamYard actually when I was first making a decision between Riverside and StreamYard. I'm looking at StreamYard now. Looks like StreamYard costs a little bit more. Maybe that was a deciding factor for me. At the end of the day, sometimes you have a couple of relatively equivalent options and you just pick one. And if it's not right, you switch to the other one. And that's probably where I wound up. Like if I landed on Riverside, I had been a guest on a podcast that used Riverside and I found it to be okay. I gave it a shot and, stuck with it until now. A year or so later, I'm exploring other options. And the other option is not because of a problem with Riverside. It's because, it's because we can get better functionality with another platform, specifically Squadcast and Descript. But, I think a lot of big people use StreamYard. I've heard good things. So, if that's the one that you want to use, then by all means, use it.
Yeah, so by you're saying they're relatively comparable. You'll be good either way.
I think so.
Yeah.
For my, estimation, they seem roughly comparable. I don't stream my podcast interviews live. I might do 3 interviews in a day, and I try to keep my recording schedule about 2 months out. Just it's what helps me feel comfortable being that booked out, recorded out. I think I got the vibe too that StreamYard was a little more focused. It's in the name on streaming, like streaming straight to YouTube. There are a lot of popular live shows that stream to YouTube. It just seemed Riverside was a little more built for the purpose that I was looking at it for, which was just recording and banking shows.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. But certainly the tool that works is the one that you should use. And, tools work differently for different people. Let's see here. So next thing I was going to talk about is your podcast host. So I will pull one up here. There are a few different things that go into actually releasing a podcast out onto the interwebs. There is the good old Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which we're all so familiar with. But on the back end, you need a podcast host to actually hold the files and handle the RSS feed and all that tech stuff that I can't say that I really thoroughly understand. And there are a lot of podcast hosts out there. To me, there is not one best option for podcast hosts. I use Podbean. And the reason I use Podbean is because they have this one little function in here that years and years ago, Whitney Sewell told me about could be advantageous. I'm going to see if I can find it here. This one right here, dynamic ad insertion. So they have an ads marketplace where you can basically have people place ads on your show that aren't necessarily related to your show. Not that. That's not what I'm talking about. Dynamic ad insertion is a function that you can use on the back end to insert your own commercials into the show after it's all done and produced and put together. And that includes back catalog episodes where you can put in a commercial that says, maybe you have a 506c deal. Put in a commercial that says, hey, we have this 506c deal as long as your securities attorney okays it and everything, talk to your attorney and all that. But you can put in an ad that is relevant today rather than relevant maybe 4 years ago when you release the episode, because someone might go back and listen. Or heck, like I said before, I have about a 2-month, try to keep a 2-month recorded episode schedule. But maybe I think of an ad that I want to try right now, or I want to try this week or next week. Well, I can put that in relatively easily. I host my own webinar discussions like this just about every other month. And one of the things that this enables me to do is put in an ad. Right now, it's a mid-roll ad that pops in the middle of the episode that says, hey, we have this webinar coming up. Go to passivewealthstrategy.com to grab your spot. It's a little more wordy than that. But next week is the webinar. It's on Thursday, the 7th. So I don't want that to be a mid-roll ad. I want that to play right at the beginning because I want to grab you right when you start listening. So it's a different audio ad and it's placed in a different place. And to do that and have it inserted in the recording, the edited episode, just a big old hassle, big headache. I'd have to work with my editor to get that done. And it would be harder to be nimble with those decisions. But this dynamic ad insertion has been very advantageous in that way. So that's really the one thing that I think you should think about if you're selecting a podcast host. And they're not, too expensive, $30 a month, something like that, 40 if you pay monthly. Most podcast hosts will have, say, unlimited storage and unmetered bandwidth. You definitely want those things. Don't limit yourself. Bandwidth and storage are cheap. They're just nickel and diming you if you're not getting unlimited and unmetered. But you need to pick a host that is easy to work with. Go into the back end, see if they're, amenable to you, or if the interface, the user interface is easy for you to use or not. We all have different preferences in that way. And then when you're setting up your show, create accounts with, say, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the other hosts out there, syndicators, where you can give them your RSS feed, which is the basically URL that says, here's where this show is, and it's updated, and this links to the episodes and show notes and all that. And then you're basically done at that point interacting with Apple Podcasts, and you only interact with your host, which in my case is Podbean. Joseph asked me to talk about a few mistakes that I made along the way. And there are a lot. I'll definitely tell you that. One of the big ones is that I edited my own show for about probably 120 episodes, which, even though I'm jollying on here, I don't really like listening to myself talk that much. But it was a great lesson and a great learning opportunity to hear my own interviewing style and ways in which I could improve. But the problem is, it's a low dollar per hour activity for a business owner to be doing. You can hire somebody to edit your show for a lot less than what the value of your time should be, or the way in which you should value your time as a real estate syndicator. Your time is much more valuable and much more better used in talking with investors, underwriting deals, and talking with brokers, all the other very important things that we need to do in this business. So I probably took too long to hire an editor. And you know what? It's scary to hire an editor because, yeah, they're kind of cheap dollar per hour, but man, it adds up. It really adds up to hire an editor. So I would recommend editing your own show for a little while using a tool like Descript or Audacity, which we can talk about. But hand that responsibility off to somebody once you have a feel for your own interviewing style and you have a good feeling about the quality of your show. So that was a big mistake that I made there. So moving on to common podcasting objections. And I wrote these down because I used all of them at one stage or another. And I imagine that others are out there using these objections as well to honestly prevent yourself from taking action. So the number one that I hear and I used is, I don't know where to find guests. How am I going to find guests? Or nobody's going to want to come on my show. It's going to be a brand new show. Well, the simple answer to that is look at all the real estate podcasts out there. If you want to host a real estate podcast, that is, and invite those people on your show. They're not all going to say yes, but guess what? Even when you have a really big show, they're still not always going to say yes. Maybe it's not the right fit for them. Maybe they don't want to do podcasts anymore. I don't know. Maybe they don't like the sound of your voice when they listen to an episode. Doesn't matter. It's not your problem. Your problem is finding people who want to be on your show. So find an established podcast. Find my podcast. Find, look at Whitney Sewell's show. Look at Joe Fairless's show. I'm sure both those guys would be okay with you looking at their shows and inviting the guests on their show on your show. And, some of them are going to say yes. So it's a lame excuse. And someone gave me a great strategy to streamline that process. Okay, that's a lot of time to find those people, find their emails and everything like that. Hire a virtual assistant. Go on Upwork.com, hire a VA whose job it is to go through those podcasts and find people's email addresses. I have several virtual assistants. One of my virtual assistants, that is his job, is finding people's email addresses. He's not full-time, but he's been great. He's been consistent, and he's really good at finding people's email addresses. So find an assistant, get them to scrape podcasts and find your people's contact informations, and you can go through there and find the people that you want to talk to. Second one, I don't know what I would talk about on my show. Well, when you have guests, you don't really know you don't need to know what you want to talk about. It's an interview-based podcast where your goal is to share the lessons and knowledge from your guest with your audience. And your goal as a thought leader, as somebody who's growing as a thought leader, is to essentially stand next to somebody who is further along in the game than you are, learn from them, and be on the same platform with them. That's essentially the purpose of building your own platform, is to elevate along with your guest. So just interviewing your guest and asking them questions. Third one I have here, I don't have time. Well, yeah, the time part is tough. And the way you can get around that is by hiring people and building systems, to go back to what I had said before. So hiring a virtual assistant to find you guests. You can do that. There will be some stumbling blocks along the way. They're not going to get it right the first time, but you need to stick with it. Editing, hire an editor that will handle that for you. That's something that, again, I don't regret editing my own show for a while, but I probably did it a little bit too long. So hire someone to handle that. As far as recording a podcast, it's a version of networking that has been more valuable to me than any other kind of networking that I've done, which is getting on an interview with a guest who has accomplished some great things, talking with them for maybe 20 minutes before we hit record, and then we record for a half an hour. And sometimes I've had folks who have no real business spending their valuable time speaking with me, but I've had folks stay on the line with me another hour just to talk about what's going on in the real estate market. What are they seeing? What types of deals are they doing? Lessons that they've learned. And that's been incredibly valuable. So look at your interviews as not just an opportunity to record an interview, but your non-recorded time is your private time with your guest is an opportunity to get some very serious networking and learning done, because your guests will share a lot with you when they're not being recorded. That's just kind of the way we are, right? We share more when we're not being recorded. And I've certainly learned a lot more on my podcast that way. Let's see. Don't know how to edit. I already covered that one. Hire somebody or learn. I'm afraid I'll stink. Well, yeah, you probably will stink. I stunk a lot at the beginning. Heck, maybe I still stink today, but I go back and listen to my early interviews and it is painful. I showed you guys that screen cap of when I was fortunate to have both Jake and Gino on my show back in 2019, which is a rare thing these days. They usually split their time podcasts now. But the good news is when you're brand new, probably nobody's listening, right? You're just building the skill of being a podcaster. Your goal is to grow your following over time and attract your investor avatar so you can raise some capital. Last one I have here is I'm afraid nobody will listen. Address that a little bit, but yeah, probably nobody's going to listen to your first couple episodes other than your friends, but that's okay, because those first couple are your opportunity to learn about yourself, learn about podcasting, learn your message, hone and refine. And then eventually, as you grow a following, you'll get better as your audience gets bigger. I wrote down another thing here when we were in our breakout room about getting booked on podcasts and having your own podcast. So those two things go hand in hand. And that is one thing that I didn't do fast enough, which is getting booked on other people's podcasts, is because I had limiting beliefs about being a guest on a podcast. Did I have a message to share? Well, I did. I just had to think about it a little while and write it down and go on a few episodes or go on a few podcasts. But if you are wanting to get booked on podcasts, the best way to get booked on a podcast is to reach out to a podcaster and say, hey, would you like to do a podcast swap? Yeah, absolutely. Now you can fluff it up a little bit and add a little bit more to it by telling them, here are the lessons that I can share with your audience, Mr. or Mrs. Podcaster. And I would love for you to share your message with my audience. That's one hand washing the other. It solves one of your problems, which is having great guests on your show. And it solves one of their problems, which is having guests on their show. And it gets you on their podcast. So the podcast swap is a highly valuable tool, especially for new podcasters who are looking to grow a following and practice their ability to go on podcasts. Another thing I wish I had done differently, if you will, is building and testing more lead magnets early on. Your goal, again, of hosting a podcast is generally to build your following, get people on your email list, build your investor database, build investor relationships. And the way you do that is with lead magnets. Hey, go to my website, download my ebook. Now, personally, I kind of bristle when I hear ebook because everybody has an ebook. I like to have something that I feel people are actually going to consume. If I were to estimate the percentage of ebooks that go unread, probably north of 99% of ebooks go unread. So my lead magnet today is a 7-day, 7-video course on red flags and passive real estate investing. They're a couple minute long videos a piece. I'll email them to you and you'll learn what I've identified as red flags in passive real estate investing. And again, that allows people to see my face, hear my voice, and get content that I genuinely believe in. I feel it looks a little bit higher effort than an ebook. I do have an ebook as well that I had done first, but I wanted another option. But it's your show, whatever your show is going to be. Build a lead magnet, test it. If people are signing up for it, great. If not, then build something new. I wish I had done more lead magnets early on. So it looks like we're just about at 8. I had no idea I had this much to say here. But if anybody has any, questions, comments, whatever.
Yeah, well, that was awesome, man. I think you gave a lot of great advice and insight into what it is, how to get started. It provides clarity, just going through the different things the different items that you need to buy, what you used, your experiences with it. Awesome, man. Does anybody have any questions?
No question. I thought it was super valuable. I appreciated the time. I thought podcasting was pretty straightforward and simple, but there's a lot of good details that you can learn in trying to get started. So I appreciate you sharing that.
You bet. Let me know when you have your podcast.
Yeah, I can definitely tell. It was funny to see that picture with you and Jake and Gino and like where you are today with your setup. So you could see the growth. But yeah, I would definitely love to connect, and I'll let you know once I finally get started.
Awesome.
Hey, just wondering with the solution that you have, I think it's Podbean you're using, and you might be switching to another one. I saw that they also have video podcast, which I actually didn't know about that one there. But can you stream from that single solution, say, to YouTube as a syndication platform, or do you do that separate?
Yeah, the video podcasting function of Podbean, that I haven't dug into. I don't think anybody's really watching video podcasts like through maybe an Apple podcast. I might be wrong about that. I think people listen to a podcast through Apple Podcasts, but through Riverside, I'm quite certain that you can stream directly live to YouTube and Facebook and a bunch of other places. Actually, I'll give you guys another little cheat here if I can. So another tool that I use, I'm going to look a little maybe vain by showing you guys this, but whatever. One of the things that you can do, hopefully you guys can see this. This is OBS. When you have a camera, I need to use this for my cell phone camera setup. One of the things you can use is OBS to look at your camera before you go live. But another function that OBS can do is it can stream a video to a feed like Facebook and make it look like it's live, even though it's not. So you can record an interview with somebody, get the video file, and then use this start streaming function. I haven't done this in a little while, so I would recommend that if you want to do this, Google it. Google streaming to Facebook with OBS. This is an open source program. This program's for free, but you can set it up to stream an interview to your Facebook, even though you already recorded it, which I think is pretty cool because people get that notification that, so-and-so is live right now. And yeah, that's another thing that I didn't know about that somebody told me about. So and the topic of going live. But most things like Riverside and Zoom will broadcast your interview live as you're recording it to like a YouTube or a Facebook, but they won't do it after the fact. But if you use an OBS, or there are probably a few other programs out there that'll do it, you can broadcast the Sachi. Oh, Grant, it seems Grant Cardone does OBS all the time. There you go. It's a free program. It's crazy. It's incredible value. Pay nothing and get a lot of value out of it. But you can definitely do that. And you can add images to your OBS and things like that. I'm definitely not an OBS power user. But if you intend to use that, I'm sure there are syndicators out there streaming live to Facebook using OBS.
Taylor, I had a question regarding the phone camera. You said you used Android. Do you have a similar app for iPhone?
Yeah, so I not an iPhone user, but my understanding is that there's like a built-in app that in iOS that you can use. There is an option for Apple for sure, 100%.
Yeah, okay, I'll find. I know the Android camera quality is much better than iPhone, so I might need to use my wife's phone then.
Well, you can get an old, this one that I'm on now is like a Galaxy S9 Plus with a broken screen. Or like I broke the screen on this phone a few years ago and just didn't throw it out, and then now I have a use for it, right? So you could get a phone with a broken screen if you wanted. But to me, the video quality compared to any webcam just blows any webcam out of the water. I don't think I'd ever buy a webcam again, but certainly a DSLR is better. A professional camera will be better. But yeah, use a cell phone.
Taylor, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit during, your presentation, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about the benefits of having a podcast, or yeah, I guess just the benefits that you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most direct benefits are 80 to 85% of my investors found me through my podcast. I started with friends and family, just like everybody else. Started with, I ran an in-person meetup here before COVID in Richmond, and I met a few investors that way. But today, excuse me, people find me through my podcast, and that's my main lead funnel, right? I ask people, potential investors, when they come to me, how did you hear about me? And if they came to me, say, through Bigger Pockets, I used to invest a lot of time in being active on the Bigger Pockets forums. If you go and look at my Bigger Pockets profile, I think I probably have like 5,000 posts or something like that, and like 4,500 votes and stuff. I was really active. Nobody who came to me from Bigger Pockets invested with me.
Wow.
Zero.
Oh
None.
my God. I've been trying to get back onto Bigger Pockets because I thought it was such a great place to find investors.
Some people have made it work. If you want to do that, do a blog. Don't do the forums. Like the forums, in my opinion, are a waste of time. Do a blog, pay for the pro so you get a link back to your reason I pay for pro now, because I have that link in my signature. But I think the Bigger Pockets forums as well have just gotten worse and worse over the years. Now there's just political arguments that, are divisive from the first post. So yeah. But the principle I mentioned before about building your own platform, when you're on a podcast, this is my platform. I'm the guy on the stage, quote unquote, right now when I'm on my podcast. But when you're on Bigger Pockets, it's a face in a crowd, right? You're one of a million people. So I think that has something to do with it. I know people who have been successful raising capital through Bigger Pockets, but to me, it just turned out to not be a great use of time.
Cool. Thanks.
What was the compounding timeline, I guess, that you saw? Because when you're doing these lead gen type of levers, pulling these type of levers, it usually takes time before you start seeing results, and then it starts to compound on itself, and you start to see more results and more people coming to you. What was kind of that timeline for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I started investing in the space as a passive investor did the first deal in 2016. So I had gotten sick of Wall Street in 2015, first deal in 2016, and then general partnered in 2019. And through that time, we did a few deals, but I wanted to focus on raising capital. So I didn't do a single deal in 2021 because I wanted to get the legal structures in place so that I could legally be a capital raiser rather than the thing that a lot of people are doing today. Because I love being able to sleep at night, not having to look over my shoulders. So I would say, after taking that pause, I definitely lost some momentum there. But 2022, when we got back at it, doing deals again really consistently, we started to see that snowball for sure. That is a good question. I would say probably 2022 as it started to snowball as we were doing deals more consistently and then people were sharing. But it's a little bit of a random walk too, because it's when you get investors and people coming in, I track as people come to me and how frequently and everything. I have that all logged on the back end. It's like a noisy thing of when people are showing up. And there are a lot of factors that decide whether people are listening to your podcast that are going to be interested. There's the market. There's how interesting was your title being a super important factor in getting people to listen to your episode. But I think I don't want to get too far away from talking about the market, but things have slowed down in the real estate space. Everybody that I know in real estate and syndication right now is having a harder time now than they were in 2022. Now, my 2023 has been better than my 2022 was, but I have seen, I would say, a bit of an inflection point where things slowed down a bit. We're still growing for sure. So that's a factor to bear in mind. But to me, people still live in our properties. There's still multifamily out there. Yeah, maybe we can't get it at a price that we would want, unfortunately, but that'll change eventually. So just continue to stay engaged. But to more directly answer your question, 2022 was probably the inflection point, if you will, to getting momentum.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're like 10 minutes after, but some people had to hop off. But if anybody has any last questions, we can get one or two more in.
I think this was really helpful, Taylor. And I also, it looks like you gave the topic for the next podcast: how to become a legal capital raiser.
You might need an attorney for that one.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much.
What?
Sorry, go ahead, Anton.
Oh, I was just going to say on the topic of topics, you mentioned that's very important. I was just wondering if you had any tips on what do you do to come up with great quote unquote titles for your podcast.
It's hard. The honest truth is it's really hard. So some guests are easier than others. And this is something you'll find if you host a podcast, that what is the lesson from the episode and how can I highlight that in like 6 words? It's very difficult. I mean, I'll oftentimes I write the titles. Like once an episode is recorded, my team handles all of it except the title. I write the title. And I think that's something that you just have to kind of iterate every time you write a title. And I won't claim that I'm the greatest title writer out there. I would say I'm almost certainly not. But think about what is the lesson from the episode? What is something that would grab a potential listener? To me, I don't want to be clickbaity. I don't want to lead somebody along with a title that promises something that the episode doesn't deliver. So that's something that I'm always trying to consider. But the honest truth is it's really hard to write a good title, and you might have to take a couple cracks at writing a title for any given episode and, just be willing to not give up on it, I guess. Sometimes if I can't come up with a title, sometimes I'll scrap an interview. That's rare, but I will scrap interviews from time to time, or if the guest was great, but it wasn't working, I'll reach out and say, hey, can we re-record this? But yeah, iterate and try to think of a good one, really.
Great questions and great advice, man. How can people did you put your number up there or your email?
I can put my email in here, or you can go to, this is another one. I'll just,
Man, Taylor, you're crushing it. You really know a lot about this stuff, man.
I'm
Thank
a
you.
nerd. I'm a nerd. This is another one, that if I'm saying, hey, if you want to invest with me, go to, punch it into the thing, investwithtaylor.com. All right. That's my URL that redirects to my website, right? If you're thinking about doing this, go to, don't go to one like GoDaddy or an expensive registrar. Go to Cloudflare. Cloudflare will sell you a domain for with no markup. It's like $10 or something. There's no excuse not to buy your domain right now. But invest with Nico. Go buy that right now. Once you're done, if you want to do this,
I like it.
Use that. It's $12 a year.
That's awesome, man. All right, let's wrap it up. If you guys want to continue this conversation, just email Taylor, put it in there, and I will send a follow-up email with this recording as well as his information, so you could contact him either through his email or finding his website and investwithtaylor.com. Pretty cool, man.
All on purpose.
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Great
Thanks.
info. Thank you, Taylor.
My pleasure. Send me an email.